The Outer Dark. Spacers are a superstitious lot. Not surprising, really. The spiritual descendants of the old seafarers back on old Earth. You'd be hard-pressed to find any self-respecting spacer that does not carry a vial of salt water and a thimble of dirt from old Earth. Although in this day and age, there must be enough vials of sea water to fill those dried-up oceans 3 times over. Gyro compasses that perturbably always point the way to Loon City, although I've never seen any two that point in the same direction. They all have their own rituals and fears, each one creating a patchwork of superstition, picking and choosing legends and stories from captains and crews of ships they've served on, passing them along piecemeal to the wide-eyed vent brats under their care. The stories, for the most part, are the same. A ship is launched, with the captain ignoring an inconvenient ritual or good luck totem, then is lost, or abandoned, or destroyed, with a handful of clues pointing to the fact that the tragedy was because the captain refused to take a piss on the portside comms relay or some such nonsense, despite the grizzled old star sailor warning him, reckon bound by a life spent on the bellies of ships across the way. The details vary wildly. Some spacers hold their breath when they embark, to carry a lungful of air from the port they've been sailing on. Others say that that's a death sentence. Some curse good Saint Tycho. Others hold his icon around their neck. The only constant is that old tangled stories and myths is that you never go beyond, past the heliopause, far enough away from the system star to not be subject to its gravity. Interstellar space, the great dark, the void within the void. Here, they say, be dragons. You can write them off as the same eccentricities, the same superstitions and myths that make spacers so charming to interview. When the old salvager I had booked passage on to write this article dropped out of the FTL partway between Hawking System and the Gerritsen salvage yard, stranding us in interstellar space for several hours, I took it as an opportunity. I will never know how much of what I saw was real and how much of it was my eyes desperately grasping for something. In that vast, gaping emptiness of space, the utter nothingness that man was never meant to see, the gap between stars. It's beautiful in its own way. There's a beauty in the absence. It's hard to quantify, but star systems have a constant haze around them. A dim globe of dust and detritus lazily rolling around. It's not something that you wouldn't ever notice unless you pause in the dark. It's intoxicating. For a brief time, after a handful of seconds staring at the sheer blackness, it started to writhe. A pit of black maggots, shadowed against further blackness, squirming, desolating kaleidoscopically deep black darkness, shimmering with light absence. A Vanta black, amidst those chaotic multidimensional detritivores, vast suppurating masses of flesh, oozing and sweating globes, surfaced from the very fabric of space, like the great humpbacks of old, gargantuan maws stretching wide and far, enough to swallow suns. Feelers and tentacles, like gargantuan bloated pillars, quested and probed. Weeping sores scoring their length, massive enough to buffet us in their gravity wake. Obscene gobbets of bleeding life, breaching their water-thin membrane of our universe, to gape and gulp those myriadic, squirming larvae that gyrate and writhe just below our surface, an orgiastic maelstrom of equestrian biology, the dimensions, the relative sizes, the errors In perspective stretched our mind. Worms the size of nebulae, swallowed up by mouths as big as buildings, gaping jaws that could swallow blue giants being choked up by morsels, barely larger than a moon. An eye, a great and terrible eye, slightly smaller than Luna, and so much bigger than Saturn. Slitted and red-rimmed, glazing itself with hellish oozing and secretions dripping into it with every blink, breached, glazed, regarded us with a horrifying finality, as we would regard an ant or a worm. The eye, I felt, all those suckling mouths and lamprey jaws, pus-ridden, blood-oozing, grasping, sucking tendrils of wrongness belonged to the eye. It stared at me for millennia and a microsecond. It understood me as we understand a fruit fly. Our engineer managed to re-engage the FTL. The captain gave thanks to Saint Tycho. The engineer burned an offering to Saint Watt. And we made it to the garrison of salvage yard. I was wrenched away from a terrible understanding. There are things there, in the outer dark, between the stars. Eldritch creatures of the blackness, reaching, writhing, grasping, devouring, squirming. And they know where we are.